Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is the user guide for the Sony a7 IV. The whole point of this video is to help you set up this camera how I personally would set it up. I'm gonna run you through everything from the very basics of the button layouts, where the battery goes, how you turn it on and off, how you take the lens on and off, the very simple stuff, but we will get into how to set up the menus for photo as well as set up the menus for video. If you don't need the super basic stuff, you can skip ahead to the different sections. There is a table of content down below. Now, if you don't own this camera and you're interested in seeing a hands-on real-world preview of it, we do have a link down below that will take you to that so you can determine for yourself if this is the right camera for you. And if you do go ahead and purchase it, well then come back here and watch this video to see how to set it up. Like I said, it's going to be a fairly long video, but it's really important to use this video as a way to set up this camera so you get it right off of the bat. So now let's jump into the outside of the camera. So the very first thing I want to get into is what happens when you take the camera out of the box. I'm going to show you how to put the lens on, I'm going to show you where the cards go, and I'm going to show you where the battery goes, very basic, and then we're going to run around the outside of the body. So let's just start with the battery. The battery is down here on the bottom of the camera. You will have a battery that comes separate in the box. You flip open this door, it pops right open. Move that tab, the battery pops out. This is a Sony Z battery. Try to only purchase genuine Sony batteries. I always recommend having at least 2 when you go out to shoot, just in case something ever happens to one of them, or maybe you forgot to charge it fully and you just need the second one to have extra juice. It can only go in one way. You use the battery, it flips that door down, put it here, pop it in, you hear the click. Oh, I thought it was going to be a click door, but it actually now has a boom. You have to move that tab to the right and it's going to lock it in place. So flip it to the left, opens, flip it back to the right, and it goes ahead and locks it. So when you first take the camera out of the box, it will not have a lens on it. You either bought it as a body only or you got it as a kit. So how do we put the lens on? So we're going to start with the lens being off for now. We've got our lens and we've got our body. When we look inside of the camera, we can see that the imaging sensor is exposed. You do not want to touch this. You do not want to get dust or lint or rain or dirt or anything inside of here. So it's a good rule of thumb to not do this when the wind is blowing, or at least put it to your back, but also keep it tilted down as much as possible when you're trying to change lenses. So the way that this works is we have a white dot right there, and we have a white dot right there on the camera. We're gonna line both of those up. I'm gonna switch hands because this is the way that I'm doing it. This is the way that I like to. So we've got white dot, we line it up, goes in one way. I'm gonna turn it away from me here, listen, we got the click. To take it off, there's a button hidden down here next to the bottom right hand of the camera where we press that, turn it towards us, the lens comes off. Same thing. Generally, I don't do it this way because this is backwards, and I'm careful and I put it on. You want to be careful, but you don't have to be super baby gloves with it, or kid gloves. I used to be like that when I first started. Of course, you don't want to damage anything. You just want to line up the white dot to the white dot and then put the lens on. Another thing I should mention is when you take that camera out of the box, it's going to have a gray cap on it that says Sony right on the front of the body. That's called the body cap. That is there to not let dust in and also protect the sensor when you don't have a lens on it. The lenses also have back caps. Make sure the back cap is on when you're not using the lens, and make sure the body cap is on when you are not putting a lens on the body or when you are transporting it. You can transport it with a lens on or a lens off. It all depends on where you're going. The next thing we're going to talk about is where the memory cards go in the camera. Right here on the side of the camera, you have a door. What you do is you move this switch down and then you pop this. Now, you may notice that the door didn't fling all the way open. The reason is this gets in the way. This little thing, grommet, gets in the way and doesn't allow the door to fully open. So then you literally have to either push the door open or move this out of the way. It's kind of a bad design, but I'm just letting you know about it. You have 2 card slots in here. You have one, which is a CF Express A card slot, but also doubles as an SD card slot, so it can go both ways. And you also have one SD card slot. We press in and the SD card pops out. So here is your SD card. This is a pro-grade digital SD card. We like using pro-grade here. They're a very reliable memory company. They make CF Express A, CF Express B. They make SD cards. They make micro SD cards as well. That's what we use here at the studio, and that's what we recommend. But if you're gonna go out there and search Amazon for memory cards, do not buy some no-name memory card, because you might end up with something that is just fraudulent and bad. Try to buy from reputable sources. You've got your B&H's, your Adoramas, your Allen's camera, your Sammy's camera out in California. There's a lot of great choices, and they all do carry these pro-grade cards. So let me show you how to put it into the camera. The SD card, the label is going to face the door, and it can only go in one way, and you press it down and it clicks in. This is a CF Express A card. It's small. It's smaller than a CF Express B card, roughly the same size as an SD card, but these are super fast, very good cards. Now, as you can see, there's 2 card slots in the camera as we talked about, but check this out. The SD card can also go into the top slot. It goes in the exact same way. You pop it in and it goes there. Now, the CF Express A card cannot fit into this bottom slot. I'm trying to show you, look, it won't go in there. Don't try to force it. Only the SD card can go in this slot. So pop the SD card back out. You can pop it back into the bottom slot, just like that. And then you put your CF Express A card back up here, which goes in the opposite way of the SD, with the label facing up in this case. And you put it in, and now you've got your 2 cards in the camera. Close the door, latch it in, and you're good to go. I know it's a little hard to see that with my hand getting in the way. We're doing the best that we can to try and show it to you, but CF Express A, top slot, SD card, bottom slot, or SD card top, SD card bottom, never CF Express A on the bottom. Now let's move around to the top of the camera. I'll show you how to turn it on and off. We already have our battery in there. On and off, real simple. I know it's simple, but it's nice to show you. You flick that switch right there, it goes on. Flick it again, it goes off. You need to be careful when you put this in your camera bag or take it out. It might sometimes automatically power on because the notch right here gets caught on your bag, and you might not realize that you just turned your camera on. Now, it should go to sleep, but there are times where if the button gets hit, it could end up taking thousands upon thousands of pictures, and by the time you get your camera out of the bag, you've burnt your entire battery, or you filled your card slot with blank images. So one of the things I don't like is this door, the way that they have this set up for the on and off switch, but it's simple, on and off, and that's just something to be careful of. A super important button on this camera is the shutter button. So it is connected to the on and off switch, but this is your shutter button right here. You can press it halfway down, very lightly, to do your autofocusing. When you press it all the way down, that is when you are triggering the shutter. Now remember, this camera has a mechanical shutter as well as an electronic shutter, so you might not audibly hear the pictures being taken, especially that this camera could do 30 frames a second. You just want to be careful and just understand the tactile feel. It's a very light, soft press here just to get your continuous autofocus or your autofocus, and then it's a full press, boom, all the way down to fully take the photo. Moving around to the top dial, you can currently see that it is set to auto, which is the green mode. So if you ever hear me say green mode, that means full auto mode. That's going to do all of the things that the camera thinks it needs to do for you. You buy this camera, you probably want to get out of auto mode, but it's okay to start there at the very beginning. P stands for program. A stands for aperture priority, where you set the aperture and the camera's going to set the rest. You've got S is your shutter priority. Manual is fully manual, where you take full control of the camera. You've got custom settings 1, 2, and 3. Those are just in case, say, you shoot indoors and you want your settings one way, and you shoot outdoors and you want your settings another way. You could custom set it to 1, 2, and 3, so you can quickly make those changes when you're on the go. Now, right under this dial, there is another dial where you see a picture of a camera, you see a picture of a video camera, and you also see something that says S and Q. So that's slow and quick for getting into, we'll get into that in the video modes. But the way that you change it is there is a button right here on the dial. It's on the back. So you put your forefinger up here and you just switch. You do this and you can switch from one to the other. So if you ever find that you're in video mode and you're like, wait, I should be in photo mode, we want to go to the one all the way to the left that has the stills camera, not the video camera. Continuing on the top right of the camera, we have a red button. What's that look like? Well, that's a record button. Something I'm going to tell you right now is just about all of the buttons on this camera are customizable in the menu. Meaning, if I don't want this to be my record button and I want it to be something else, I can change that in the menu. Same thing with the C2 button. It's a custom 2. Sony lets you change almost everything in this camera to be customizable to you. Now we've got 2 dials back here. What do these 2 dials do? Well, this one on the left, this is controlling your shutter speed when you're in manual or in shutter priority. You turn it to the right to go one way, you turn it to the left to go the other way with your shutter speed. You have another dial right here. This is another command type dial, but it is currently locked. So don't force it. If it isn't going, that means that this button right in the middle is locked in lock position. If I go ahead and I press it, you can audibly hear it click and you can feel it. Now I can turn this dial. Straight out of the box, this is going to be set to what's called exposure compensation. And later on in this video, I'm going to change it because I wanted to control my ISO. Click it back in to have it locked, because if it's locked, it can't move and you can't make an accidental change. Now, since I showed you where your shutter speed is, let me show you how you change your aperture. Front of the camera, right where your forefinger would go, you got your shutter button here, but this right here is another dial. You turn it to the right, you turn it to the left, and that is how you're going to change your aperture. Now, if you're someone who's coming from, say, a Canon camera, this is kind of backwards to what you're used to. You can make the change to make it very similar, but just know that the aperture on a Canon is on the back spinny wheel. You might not want it up here, so you can make the change, but just know this is pretty self-explanatory these days. You got your aperture here, you've got your shutter speed here, and then I'm going to change my ISO to this dial right here. Moving to the center top of the camera, this is your hot shoe. This is where you would put a flash, but this is also a digital hot shoe, meaning with the certain accessories like a microphone that has the digital hot shoe capability, it's going to pass through the digital information from the microphone directly into the camera, meaning you don't need to use any cables. So that is a very powerful tool to have built into the camera. Right below the digital hot shoe, this is your EVF, or what's called an electronic viewfinder. You put your eye up to this to see everything that the camera sees. This is super powerful and really a very important piece of your camera because you want your eye to go up to it when you are shooting. Now, right here is a proximity sensor. So let me turn the camera on. You can see that the screen lights up, but if I put my finger right here, obviously it switches from the screen to the electronic viewfinder. So that's how it's shifting what you're seeing. You might notice sometimes that the screen is on and the EVF doesn't come on again, but that might be because the proximity sensor might be dirty, or maybe it had a droplet of water on it. Now, if you're someone who wears glasses, you might want to use the diopter, which is right here on the side of the camera. Go ahead and go into the menu setting. The reason I bring up the menu is so that you see some text on the screen and you just turn this diopter, you move it up or you move it down, and that is going to control the movement inside of here to make it better for your eyes. Now, I do wear glasses, but I do not wear glasses when I take photos, so I make sure that I set the diopter so I see everything is sharp inside of the camera. Since I'm talking about the electronic viewfinder, let me just give you a quick tutorial on the proper way to hold a camera. Right hand, you know where that goes. Left hand, a lot of people they question where it goes. Does it go up here? Does it go here? No, it goes underneath. You turn it down and it goes underneath. But we have the electronic viewfinder, tuck our elbows, bring the camera up to your eye, whether it's your left eye or right eye, doesn't matter. This is stable. This is the proper way to shoot. I know a lot of people try to shoot like this these days, where they look at the back screen. I do not recommend that because it's not as stable, and it's also harder to track subjects that way, and it just looks so much better through the electronic viewfinder. Now, speaking of the LCD screen, this is the LCD screen right here. The time that you use that is when you need to go high or you need to go down low. This is a really well put together screen. So let me show you how it works. It works in multiple ways. You can pull it out a little bit, tilt it up like this. So if you need to get down low, that's the time where I say it's okay to use the screen over the EVF because you have to put this down on the ground. But what if you need to go above your head? Well, you can go ahead and tilt it like this, and it tilts on this roughly, this looks like a 40-some degree angle. It won't go any further than this, so don't try to force it, but you can put it above your head, and that way you can see something that's happening up above. But even better yet, look at this. It flips out and it rotates. So if you want to go vertical and shoot down low, you can go vertical, down low, just like that. So this is a really thought out, well put together screen. Never force it. Never force anything too far. Don't over twist it. If it's giving you some tension, don't go too far, because if you break this, well, you're gonna have to send it back and spend a lot of money to fix it. And of course, lastly, the one thing you can do is you can, record yourself if that's something that you want to do. It puts it off to the side and you can see and monitor what you are currently doing. Another thing I want to show you about this touch screen on the back of the camera is there's some really powerful menus that you can get to if you swipe. So one of them is if you swipe from the right. I'm pressing on the screen and I'm swiping. It's not perfect every single time, and personally, I don't use this very often, but it brings up a quick menu that you can make changes to and put different functions there, depending on what you want to shoot. To get rid of it, I just put my finger here again and I flick it out. There's another one from the bottom we can flick up, and that's bringing up the function menu. But you might notice there is also a function button right there. The function button does the same thing and brings up, I think it's easier. I don't like using the touchscreen to do these things. As you can see, it's not perfect every single time that I do it, but just know that those options are there. All right, so we've got our C3 button. We remember C2 before. I don't even know where C1 is. There it is. I was like, where's C1? All right, we got C3, menu, C3PO. I thought that was coming next, but no, we've got our C1 button here. Again, customizable buttons. They're preset to where Sony thinks you want them, but we can change them all after the fact. To the right, you have your AF on button. This is a way that you could do back button focus, which I don't recommend doing, but also you see the magnifying glass next to it. That means it's a sub menu where it can also zoom in on an image after you take it or when you're previewing it or reviewing it. You have an AEL button that you could remap, which I end up remapping as well. You also have a joystick with the knipples on it. This is how you can get through your menu system. Of course, you can touch the screen and swipe on the screen to go from image to image or change different menu settings, but this is like a joystick, like up, down, left, right, BA, and select start, for those who are old enough to remember that. You can also move focusing points with that joystick as well. Already told you what the function button does. You have another command dial back here. You can spin it. It's not currently set to anything when you first get the camera, so we're gonna set it to something else or just leave it deactivated. But you can see that there's other things in white. So for example, this one says ISO. In order to get to the ISO, I would just press to the right, because this is another form of a joystick with a center button that you could press, and basically that's your enter or OK button. You've got your playback button for playing your images, and you've got your trash can for deleting your images or calling Oscar the Grouch. And also, you'll notice it has C4 next to it. It doesn't explode when you press it, and it doesn't blow up Oscar the Grouch. He wouldn't be too happy there. It's just another custom 4 button. So there's a lot of customization you can do with this camera. Now, flipping it over to the bottom, we have our battery door we already talked about, and we have our tripod mount right here. If you were to get a vertical grip or a battery grip for this camera, you would end up taking the door off, putting the grip on right through here. It's real easy to do. But this is the bottom of the camera. Your tripod plate goes here, and then you can attach it to a camera. Moving on to the left side of the camera, we've got all of the ports that you have in the camera. Right here, we flip this door open. I know my hand's blocking it, but right there, that is your HDMI port. Right here are two USB-C ports. We can open that up. One is for charging, one is for data transfer. We also have this top one is for a microphone input. We put our microphone there, and then we have a headphone jack underneath this one right here. So those are the ports on the camera. Moving around to the front of the camera, there's not much to talk about on the front, as we just have the one button here down on the bottom, which is for the lens release. And you also have a light on the front that lights up when it's trying to focus. There, you got some orange light going. I generally turn that off in the menu, and I will show you how to do that. But that is a focus assist beam, which I think is kind of annoying, especially if you're shooting in low light situations and people are seeing that beam show up all of the time. So that right there is the outside of the camera. We're gonna move into setting up the camera for stills first before we get into the video section. Again, there is a table of contents down below so you can jump around, but don't forget, bookmark this video so you can come back to it at any time where you have a question, and that table of contents will get you the answer. Hopefully. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, use what I've been using for my personal photo website at jaredpolin.com for well over 15 years now, because it's simple, easy, affordable, and I don't need to know any coding. To get your 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now, back to the video. Now we're gonna jump into the menu settings for shooting stills. Keep in mind that I've switched my camera into manual, so I unlock all of the settings that are available, because not all of the settings are available when you're in full auto. I want to take full control of my camera. Now you might notice that I'm plugged into something. This is a recorder that allows me to show you my menu. So I can show you everything that I'm doing on the back of the camera. You can see it here, so you can follow along as we're doing it. The difference is I lose all touch functionality here. So I can't touch the screen at all, which is something that you can do if you weren't plugged in like this. So I'm just gonna use the down arrows or the dials to twist and turn. Just know that you can touch your screen, but I can't touch this because MC Hammer said so. So now let's jump into the menu. I am hitting the menu button. And the first thing that we are faced with is something that says My Menu Settings. Now we're gonna get into this later on because I want to go through the settings for the camera first, and we'll come back to this last. But basically, this is a place you can put the settings you like to use often that you wanna get to quickly. You can do that right here. You can think of it like it's a bookmark menu, so you can get back to things that you bookmark in this camera, which it's really easy to do. Sony makes it super easy to add to my settings, and you'll see that when we go through the menu. One other thing now, this is called your main one. This is a very powerful bunch of tiles. Since we haven't gone over the settings yet to explain what each thing is, we're not gonna go into this just now. We'll come back into this later, but there is so much information that you can learn from this one tile. There's so much you can change, and it's super powerful. But what we really need to get into is the red shooting menu. Now this is for stills. So this top dial is set to stills. It is not set to video. Now this is a very long section right here. So when we arrow over, just know that there's two menus. There's the main menu here, and then another sub menu over to the right. As we dial all the way down, it will end up going to the next section, but here we're gonna start with image quality. So we have image quality is currently set to JPEG. This is where you could switch to HEIF or JPEG. Now, HEIF is a new file format that is giving you a 10-bit file, where JPEG is giving you an 8-bit. Obviously, a lot of people know what JPEGs are. Not as many know what HEIF are, and I think just about all computers should be able to open it today. I'm not a JPEG shooter. You can see on my shirt that it says I shoot RAW. That means that I use the RAW file format. Now, right off the bat, it's perfectly fine to shoot JPEG and RAW together. Just know that RAW files are much larger. They're gonna take up more space. Think of it as an uncompressed file, or it's having all of the data. There's different compressions that the camera does, but it gives you all of the data. Think of it like a cake. If I was to bake a cake and I take all of the raw ingredients and I put it in the oven and I screw it up, well, if it was a JPEG, you'd have to throw it out and you can't go back and start over again. With the raw file, I just hit reset in the computer and I go back to all of the raw ingredients and I can start over. So it's something that is very beneficial for the future. I'm still editing or able to edit raw files from 2003 when I got my first Pro DSLR. I can edit them today even better than I could back then because of how much better the technology has become with the editing softwares. And if I only shot in JPEG, it's a baked-in file. If I made changes to it and I saved over it, I can never go back to the beginning. So just keep that in mind. Now you can just touch the menu. Like I said, I can't. So I could either hit arrow down or I could turn this wheel and it would go ahead and go down in the menu. So we're gonna go to image quality settings next. So we can see that the file format is set to JPEG. But what if I want to shoot RAW and JPEG? I could go RAW JPEG, or I could go just straight RAW, which is where I personally would go to. We've got RAW file type. We've got lossless compressed, we've got compressed HQ, and we've got compressed down at the bottom. I am a lossless compressed person. I want to shoot in the highest quality RAW file that the camera offers me, which is lossless compressed. Remember, you can always dumb down a file, you can't dumb it up. If you shoot a small JPEG, so let me go ahead and show you this. We're gonna put RAW plus JPEG on so that it opens up these menus right here for JPEG quality. Because if you're gonna shoot both, right here you've got extra fine, like me, I'm extra fine. That's right, look at this face, I'm fine. That was really bad, but hey, I'm extra fine. So I would shoot in extra fine. I wouldn't shoot in fine, standard, and I wouldn't shoot in light because you can always dumb down a file, you can't dumb it back up. JPEG image size. So 33 megapixels is the largest because that's what this camera captures. You have medium for 14 and small is 8.2 megapixels. As I keep saying, you can always dumb the file down, you can't dumb it back up. So why would you shoot in a smaller file format? And I know some people are like, but it's not that important. You don't know what's important until it's important. That is a quote. Sony does something interesting with their menu. They give you options to, they'll give you multiple places to do the same thing. Like this record media settings is a very important thing that would normally in other menus come up later, but they throw it right here. So we can go ahead and click this. The reason we would use this is, let's see, it says recording media and you see a stills camera. It says slot 1. So right now it would only save images to slot 1, not slot 2. Now I like to shoot what's called redundant. They call it simultaneous recording. And so what that means is, if I'm taking pictures and I have two cards in the camera, two of those pro grades, one of those CF Express A and one of the SD cards, I would be able to save the images that I'm taking to both at the same time. So I can have the raw files going to card slot 1 and card slot 2. That's how I personally like to shoot. If you want to do RAW to one and JPEG to the other because you need to deliver those JPEGs fast or something like that, that is the time where you would use that. But I do it for redundancy purposes. If something for some reason happens to a memory card, the rare instance where that would happen, well, I would have it saved on 2 card slots and hopefully everything is fine. So I go to simultaneous recording. And as you can see below that, you could do the same for video, simultaneous recording. You also have auto switch media. I have that off because I am using both cards at the same time. And then we can go right back into image quality, right back into this menu, and we could lock all that in. We hit OK, and we are back here to aspect ratio. 3:2 aspect ratio is what the full size of the sensor is. You're capturing 3:2. You know, like remember 4:6 and 8:12 and things like that? Well, if you multiply these, you get 4:6. That's full frame. 8:12, full frame. 8:10, not full frame. You have 4:3 aspect ratio, is similar to the older TVs that we had. You've got 16:9, which is like a movie format, and you have 1:1, which is square. I like to stay in full aspect ratio because you can make these changes after the fact if you would like. Keep in mind, if you're shooting JPEG and you say, go down to 1:1, which is a square image, and you take a picture and you review that image, but you miss something off to the left or the right that would have been there, you can't get that back. It is baked in. It's locked into that JPEG. Now, if we were shooting RAW and we shot 1:1, you would be seeing a square when you take your picture, and you'll see a square when you preview it on the back of the camera. When you bring it into the computer, it's going to be a square. But what happens if you want to see the entire 3:2 aspect ratio? Being that you shot RAW, you hit reset and you get the entire image. JPEG, locked in. RAW file, you have the option to go back after the fact. Next up, we see file format as it pertains to video. Now, this is only when we're in the stills photo mode. So this is only going to change, like if we hit this record button up here on the top of the camera, that is going to be the video mode that it's going to capture with when we are in stills. So if we go over there, a basic setting for movie shooting, you can set all items when set to movie mode. By default, it's set to HD, which is 1080p, and you can see that we have 4K if we go up and we have 4K if we go down. If we go up, it's a higher form of compression, and if we go down to this one right here, it's all I. It is a better video format where you're capturing more quality with less compression. Next up, we've got movie settings. Record frame rate. So you've got your 24p, your 30p, and 60p. So 24p is more cinematic, 30 is, we never shoot in 30 personally, and 60 is if you want to slow it down a little bit, you can do that. Just know that sporting events that you watch are generally shot in 60p and movies are generally shot in 24p. So we'll get more into video settings when we change into the actual video modes and get into that setting later. So APS-C shooting is set to auto. So this is if you were to use any of the crop sensor lenses on here, it would automatically go into that mode and crop down. Now, I wouldn't use crop sensor lenses on a full frame body, but if that's what you have, just know that it's going to automatically crop down for that. Next up, we've got long exposure noise reduction is currently on. This is something that I personally turn off. Now, if you look at the bottom of the screen, let's see what Sony has to say about this when we hit the question mark button. Which is currently set to the trash can. We hit it and it goes, turns on long exposure noise reduction. Processing takes as long as shooting. That's funny. So it doesn't really get very detailed here, and you can see that it probably wasn't written as a person that speaks English as a first language. So if you ever need to learn more, like get into the menu, something you don't understand, you can hit that, but just know that it really doesn't get super detailed. I turn off long exposure noise reduction personally because it really just affects your JPEGs. So I don't like noise reduction because it smooths out the image. And what happens is it looks more like a painting and less like a photograph, because any of the noise and grain that comes out, the longer exposure that you have, you get a little bit more noise and grain. I kind of like the natural look of that. And I don't like having it baked in. So again, if you're shooting RAW, you can go back and you can do some of this stuff later. JPEG, it would be locked in to the file. We're going to scroll down. We are at high ISO noise reduction is set to normal. This is another thing that I set to off. Again, if I'm going to do any noise reduction, it's going to be after the fact, and I don't want it baked into the file. It just makes it look really bad. And that's really meant for when you're shooting at higher ISOs, it's going to do some sort of noise reduction in the camera. Again, that's going to affect your JPEGs, not your RAW files. The next one is grayed out, and it says that this operation or setting is not available as follows in RAW and JPEG format. So you would have to be in the HEIF format to be able to turn on the HLG stills for images. That's if you want something like HDR images, which I generally do not want. Color space is set to sRGB. That's where we personally leave it. And the last one of this section is lens compensation. I leave this all set to auto at this point, or the last one is set to off. The reason I do that is a lot of these lenses are using what's called digital lens correction. And so it's a way that they're corrected in the camera. So what you see through the camera is what you're going to get with your file. With your RAW files, you can turn some of that off after the fact, and you can see, maybe I like it for this image, maybe I don't like it for that one, but with the JPEGs, it is locked in. I'm going to arrow back to the left, but if I wanted to go right to the media section, I could have just, gone to the bottom here and it's going to go right to media. But I wanted to show you that it says media right here, and you can see file, shooting mode, drive mode, and the arrows down, which means this menu goes deep. But let's start with media. So we've got format. Formatting is very important. When you first put your cards in your camera, you're going to want to format it so that the card talks to the camera much better. It's also wiping it clean and getting it ready to accept your files. You can see that you can do that for slot 1 and you can do that for slot 2. We would go ahead and hit the center button here and it says execute format. If I do that, it's going to delete everything on the card. So if you haven't backed up your images yet, if you already took photos but you haven't saved them anywhere, you do not want to execute a format. If you do that, it's going to do exactly that. It's executing your files basically and zapping them and getting rid of them and making it very difficult to recover. There are ways to recover those files potentially, but we don't want to have to deal with that. So make sure if you're going to format your cards, you've already backed something up on your computer and to another external device. Oh, by the way, ProGrade Digital, they make external SSDs to save more images. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel right here because I don't want to format my cards. So before I go down the list, let's go to the bottom of the screen. Do you see the trash can? And there is a, we'll call that a hamburger, 3 lines and a question mark. So if we hit Oscar the Grouch here, it says there's an add to my menu and an in-camera guide. So the in-camera guide is where it's basically like a user manual. It's going to give you a little bit more information. Let's see what it says by hitting the center button. Thank you, in-camera guide. What you will notice with the in-camera guide from Sony is that it doesn't run deep. It doesn't run deep. That's why I'm making this video. Format the memory card. No shit, Sony. Really? Anyway, okay, let's go back. Let's hit it again. Oscar the Grouch. And it's not me being grouchy, but we've got add to my menu. Well, this is awesome. This is something that Sony gets really right, is let's say I want to add format to my menu. I go add to my menu. And then I'm like, okay, let's put it to my menu number 1. Add to this section. Boom, added. So now if I go up to my menu, there it is. Format is there. It's really meant, as Steven has reminded me time and time again, Steven's behind the camera over there, that it's like your bookmarks. Things that you want to get to quickly, that you always know where they are, you can do it right there. So boom. Let's go back to media. We did format. Next up, record media settings. We already did this, so we can skip ahead. Next, we've got recover image database. This doesn't exist in a Canon, and it doesn't exist in a Nikon or honestly any other camera that I've really ever seen other than Sony's. Randomly, for who knows why, you might turn on the camera and it might go, we need to recover the database. We don't know why. You just hit OK and it recovers it, and it scares you because you think you might lose everything. We don't know why it does it, and the Oscar the Grouch mode here doesn't really tell us very much. It says recovers the image database file for movies and enables recording and playback. I don't know. I've never had to do this manually. So number 3 says file. I skip all of this information stuff and go right down to copyright info. So this is what's going to be saved in the metadata of the file, because every time you take a picture, information is getting written to that file. What information do we want written to it? Well, copyright info, I like to put copyright on. I turn that on. Set photographer, that's me. I would go in here and you could touch the screen for this and you would go in and, whatever, it makes sense. I don't need to explain it, self-explanatory. And then I'm gonna hit cancel. But yeah, I would set copyright. So I would do Jared Polin. Copyright would be FroKnowsPhoto. I like to put my phone number in the file just to have it there and display copyright information. So that's just showing us copyright holder name. If we were to put it in, it would put it right there. So I make sure that right is on. Now, right serial number. I don't know why this is off. So your camera is unique to you. It has a serial number. I always want that information to be written to every single file that I take so I know what camera it was taken with. Or if you're ever looking at metadata because someone stole an image and you're like, hey, there's my serial number, and they tried to say it was theirs, you're like, nope, that's my camera, not yours. Now we're in shooting mode settings. This is a confusing menu. The only thing that I change here is we go to camera setting for memory. Remember the 1, 2, and 3 that I showed you on the top dial? Well, this is where you would go in and make those changes. So you've got 1, 2, and 3. Now, if I love the way that this camera was set up right now for a specific mode for shooting, I would go ahead and hit OK, and it would say registered to number 1. And if I made a bunch of changes, and I'm like, oh, I like this for shooting indoors, then I could register number 2. You also see M1, M2, M3, and M4. These aren't set to a dial. You would have to go into the camera to let them know that, well, I want to use M1 or M2, M3, or M4. So we can see all of the settings that are set there. This is super deep, so I'm not going to go into there much more, but that is where you would make those changes. Now, here's an example of how I set it up when I was on safari in Kenya. I set it up for video, that if I had it on 1, it was 24p. If I had it on 2, it was 60p. And if I had it on 3, it would go to 120 for slow motion. So that's how I had it set, and it made it so easy to go from one to the next and not have to dive into the menu. All I had to do was change the top dial. Let's go to drive mode, which you see it says single shooting. What that means is when I press the shutter button fully, and even if I hold my finger down on it, it's gonna take one picture. We scroll down, we can see that it's set to continuous high under drive mode. Drive mode means if I hold my finger down, it's going to keep taking photos, but how fast is it going to do that? So you can see that this is a sub menu because it has arrows left and right. So I can just press right or left. So we can see low shooting mode, medium, high, and high plus. And you might be saying, well, how many frames does that mean? We're gonna get to that in just a minute in the menu where you will see what is attached to each one of these. So I'm gonna set it back to high for now. We've got our drive mode for self timer. So right now it's set to single. In 5 seconds, once it's focused and I press the shutter button, after 5 seconds, it will take one picture. Of course, you can do 10 seconds all the way down to 2 seconds. So we'll leave it on 5 for now. But right below that is self-timer continuous. So right now it's set to 10 seconds and 3 images. So it's gonna take 3 images after that 10-second countdown. So if I wanted to do a group photo or a photo of myself and I didn't want to use the app or something like that, I would sit here, I would go set up the camera, I hit the shutter button, run back around, 10 seconds later I get a picture, and then I'm like, think of it like a photo booth. It's gonna take multiple images. Then we have drive mode for continuous bracketing. So this is super powerful. Bracketing is where it's going to take 3 images, but in this case, it's going to change the exposure by 0.3. Or I could go ahead and turn the back dial and say, I want to go 1 stop. And then I want it to go 3 images or 5 images or 6. Geez, if you went 9 stops at one stop difference, it's going to be not very good. So generally, if you're doing this, you're not going to do 9 of those for that. You could do 3 or 5, and it's going to be very interesting. The time you would do that is if you're on a tripod and you wanted to take 5 images bracketed and then maybe mush it together in Lightroom later to give you a super high dynamic range image, you could go ahead and do that after the fact. Next is single bracket. I actually got a little confused there. This is continuous bracketing, which kind of makes sense because it's like continuous bracketing, but being that this says single, what that means is that's single shot. So every time I press the shutter, it's going to be 0.3 EV, a third of a stop difference. I press it the next time, it's going to change. The third time, it's going to change. We're in continuous. If I held my finger down and I had it set to 9 frames, it's going to take all 9 of those frames at different increments of exposure. That's what the continuous means, and that's what single means. Next, we've got focus bracketing. This comes in handy when you're using something like a 100mm macro that Sony has, and you're gonna shoot an object, but generally speaking, macro is a very shallow depth of field. But if we want to, say, photograph from front to back of an entire coin, you could have it do like 900 photos, and it will change focus at small steps and take a picture, and then you have to mush all of those 900 images together, and it's going to stack the image. It's pretty damn impressive and powerful that it's built into the camera. Next is drive mode white balance bracketing. This is not something that I'm ever going to personally use, but what it's going to do is change the white balance subtly each time you take a bracketed image. Then you've got dynamic range optimizer. It's another thing that I don't use, but this is going to affect more so the JPEGs, but it's going to change that to low, medium, high when you go ahead and take the pictures. So I scroll down, that takes me back to the top. Generally, I leave it in high or high plus. It all depends on what I'm shooting, and it becomes personal preference. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you FroPack 4 in action on this photo right here, and it looks absolutely incredible, starting with Blue's Clues, followed by Brooklyn. We've got C41, Copper Tone, DeLorean, High C, Kaleidoscope, Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, Thick, and Wet Hot American Summer. But my all-time favorite from FroPack 1, with one click of a button here, we've got Skittles, and it goes boom. But new and exclusive to FroPack 4, we've got 4 custom adaptive Lightroom presets called Face Enhance, Full Body Skin Enhance, Eye Only Enhance, and Background Blur. So look, if you want to speed up your raw workflow or give yourself a great starting point, or also edit on the go in Lightroom Mobile, because these presets work on JPEGs and RAW on the go, we created 14 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or, if you want to save even more, you can get the Grand Slam bundle that includes FroPack 1, 2, 3, and 4, and of course, Skittles is included. Now, let's get back to the video. Next up, we have Drive Mode Limit. All this means is, let's say I don't want low, or I don't want self-timer to ever show up in the menu by accident or bracketing. It won't show up in the menu when I go on the screen. I go ahead and lock this in by hitting OK, and then we move on to continuous shooting speed. This is what I was talking about earlier when you have high plus, H, medium, and low. So for high plus, for electronic shutter, we can see we could set it to 30 frames, 20 frames, 15, 10, and 5. Those are the increments that you have. Next up, we have high, which says electronic shutter, and it's set to 20. If I go in here, it won't let me set it to 30, but you got 20, 15, 10, and 5. But the electronic shutter part, let's talk about that. You can do 30 frames per second only when you're in electronic shutter. Mechanical shutter will max out at 10 frames per second. Let's say we want our mid, or I like to say, I don't know, medium. Maybe we only want it to be 10 frames a second, and then we want our low to be 5. That's perfectly fine. So this is where you would go to control that. You have a lot of customization that you can do right there. Next up, we have continuous shooting speed boost settings. Don't you love how they abbreviate this stuff and you have to kind of try to figure it out? This is set to 30 images. Speed boost, we don't have a dedicated speed boost button, but we can customize one of the buttons to go into speed boost. Where this comes in handy is, say I'm in 20 frames per second because I'm shooting in high at 20 and I want to quickly get to 30 and boost it and SPD boost it. You know, speed boost it. I would set a button. Generally, this back AEL button is something that I might set to the speed boost button, and I would press it, and it would say speed boost is on, and it would give an arrow on the screen. Now I'm shooting at 30 frames per second versus the 20, the 5, the 10. So it's going to override that, and boom, get you right up to the top. Think of it as if you're in Fast and Furious and you want to drive faster. You press a button, and it kicks in that stuff, and you go speed boost. Moving on, we have pre-capture settings. Your camera is capable of basically going into the past and taking those images that you might have missed. Now, there's caveats to that for how that works. The way that works is all controlled right here. So pre-capture record time is set by default to a half a second, but you could go ahead and set it to 1 full second. Now, I don't always leave it in 1 second. In fact, it's gonna be pretty rare that I leave it set to 1 second. I'm usually at about a half a second because my reaction times are pretty good. But if you're super late or it's something super important that might happen and you don't want to miss it, just know that you're going to record a lot of extra frames because 1 full second with this camera is 30 shots. So if you shoot 30 frames after it recorded 30 shots in the buffer, wow. Now you're getting 60 frames, so you're chewing up a lot more data. Next up, it says pre-capture start trigger. It says both valid. That's super confusing unless you're watching this video and you have me to make it less confusing for you. That just means that it will be activated with a half shutter press and an AF assigned button on the back. That's if you use back button focus to do that. I personally don't, so I just leave it for both valid. Here is how pre-capture works. Let's use birding as an example. If the bird is sitting there and being like, I'm a bird and I'm just doing this. But then all of a sudden it flies away. As long as your finger is pressed halfway down on the button, the camera is buffering images. It's basically taking photos. It's not going to save them, so it's taking 30 of them, but getting rid of each one every time it takes it, like the last one, and it keeps filling in, so that when the bird decides to fly away, you fully press the button without removing your finger before so, and it's saving those 30 images prior, if we had it set to 1 second, and everything after the fact. You remove your finger from the shutter button, it is going to get rid of the buffer, so it's not pre-saving those at all. So just be careful that if you know you want to pre-capture, make sure your finger stays halfway down, and then you follow through and press all the way so you don't lose what was in the buffer. Next up, we've got bracket settings. This is where you go, and if you want to go deeper into customizing the bracket settings, you can totally come in here and do that. It's pretty self-explanatory. We've got interval shooting function. This is an intervalometer that's built into the camera. Back in the day, you had to spend like $139 to buy an external intervalometer. It's very hard to say, intervalometer, which would do everything that it now has built in. This is when you would want to shoot, say, time lapse. Something's happening. Maybe you're building something in the backyard and you want to record that in a time lapse, but you don't want to shoot video because that's just going to keep chewing up a lot of data. You could come in here and say shooting start time. What shooting start time means is right now it's set to 1 second. So I would press the shutter button and then 1 second later the timer, it all starts. It would take a picture every 3 seconds for 30 shots. Or you could go in here and you can set it for, I'm assuming, 9,999 shots in a row. So for that many shots, it would go every 3 seconds. Super powerful. So yeah, I could go ahead and I could lock that in and be like, yep, let's do that. Actually, just to screw with you guys, I'm gonna make this an 8. For anybody that really likes things in symmetry, I just messed with the chi right there. Oh, you will also notice inside that menu and right here at the bottom, shooting time, it will be 8 hours, 19 minutes, and 51 seconds to get through 9,998 images. Yeah, it's kind of like when you try to cut something in half, but you don't do it perfectly, and then you're like, that's painful. Auto exposure tracking sensitivity is currently set to mid, though I'd like to say medium, and so it should be MED, but you've got high, medium, and low. So what's happening here is if the light changes for a second and you have it on medium, it may not make the change super fast. If it's on high, faster change, low, not gonna change as fast, just if the light is subtly making those little tweaks. Continuing down, we've got shutter type for the interval timer. You've got electronic shutter, or you could go in and change it to the mechanical shutter. Just know that one's making noise, one's not making noise. So just know that if you want it to be silent, you can go ahead and use the electronic shutter. It also will save some life of your camera because back in the day, if you were to do a ton of these, it's using that shutter and you had a certain amount of shutter actuations, generally speaking, before one of them blew up. So with the electronic shutter, you don't have to worry about that because nothing is actually moving. And that takes us out of interval shooting functions. You see how deep these Sonys go. They go super deep into the menus. What do we got next? Next up, we have something called noise reduction shooting settings. This is for a new feature called compositing RAWs. Basically what it's doing, it's kind of like what an iPhone does when it says, hold this for 1 second without moving. It's taking multiple images and then mushing it together after the fact to try and give you a better, cleaner image. In the future, these cameras will get to a point where they're probably going to do this automatically, but this isn't something that I'm going to dive in deeply because it's not a feature that I would use. And lastly here, we've got shooting for HDR settings. We're not going to dive into this, but this is basically, if you're going to shoot HDR images, it's going to take multiple types of images and put them together. I don't mess with this stuff, and really no pros are using any of these settings at this point. Now we're moving on to 7, which is your shutter modes. So right now we've got, let's see, silent mode settings. We go in here and silent mode is currently off, which means that the camera will make noise. And if we turn silent mode on, it would basically deactivate the ability to shoot with the mechanical shutter, and all of the beeps, the blips, and the bops will, and the creeps, I almost forgot the and the sweeps. You know what movie that's from, Steven? No, it's Spaceballs. The bleeps, the creeps, the sweeps, the bloop bloop, Anyway, basically it turns off all of any noise functions that would turn on. This would keep them off. As a reminder, if you turn this on and you're in mechanical shutter, it's going to automatically turn it into electronic shutter. So you will not hear any noise. Let's go back out here. We've got shutter type. You've got your mechanical or electronic. You can change it right here. So that's pretty simple. Electronic front curtain shutter, we do leave this on. Next up, we have shoot start display. This is kind of confusing. That's why we're explaining it. But this is if you want true blackout free shooting, you just leave this off. If you turn it on, you're gonna take a picture and it's gonna like black out. Kind of similar when you used a DSLR or a SLR back in the day. You would take the picture and you would lose it for just a second. Well, that's what you would do. I don't even know why that's even in here. Release without lens. Well, why would I want to be able to take video or photos if there isn't a lens attached? This should be by default disabled. Release without a card. Why would we want to take pictures without a card? The only time is if you're showing a demo. I get it, demo mode. But this isn't demo mode. You bought the camera. You don't want to accidentally take pictures without film in the camera, AKA a memory card. Anti-flicker settings. This is very important. We've got anti-flicker shooting. You can see there's different options here. You've got variable shutter and you got anti-flicker shooting. The anti-flicker shooting is more of the old style. You go into a gym and you have flickering old sodium vapor lights. You turn it on and the camera is going to detect when the lights are flickering and wait till the flicker isn't happening to take the picture. It's all done automatic and it might slow down your shooting a little bit. It's not really noticeable. Next up is variable shutter. This is very cool. If you're shooting a concert, you're in a concert situation, there's a lot of flickering LED lights and you're not sure what the shutter speed should be, or you're getting some banding in your electronic images, because this is for electronic shutter, you would go into variable shutter mode. You would turn this on, and then when you turn it on, you go into this, now shows up, variable shutter settings. It will scan the scene in front of you and then set the custom shutter speed, allowing you to now shoot at something weird like 256.0th of a second. It is very powerful and very good to use. And I can change it manually. I'm just dialing the shutter up and you can see how it's changing ever so slightly. So instead of 1/250th or 1/500th, we are in between. Moving on, we're now more than halfway through the shooting menu. Let's get down to image stabilization. Steady shot is on. That's just so that the camera has its own built-in image stabilization. We like obviously having this on for most situations. You might find that if you're on a tripod, you may want to turn it off. I generally just leave it on all the time. Now, if you're using, say, an old vintage lens, you're adapting it, or it's a manual lens for whatever reason, and you want to still have image stabilization, it's going to automatically detect that. But if it can't, you can go into manual and you can then tell it what focal length you're using, and it will do its best and do its darndest to get it right. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this back to auto. Next up, we have number 9. Number 9. Zoom. Now, this is only if you have a powered zoom lens. You would go into this function. I don't use power zoom lenses, so I'm not gonna go in there at all. Continuing on, we've got shooting display, number 10. This is where you would put grid lines on. If you want to have grid lines on to help you with your composition or your rule of thirds or making sure things stay straight, that's up to you. I don't shoot with grid lines, so I leave it off, but you can see that there's a bunch of different options here. You've got your general rule of thirds, golden ratio grid, which I think is really stupid. The golden ratio I think is stupid personally, but we've got square grid and we've got diagonal and square grid. This is if you're attacking in Star Wars and you're trying to blow up the Death Star, you go into this mode because it's right in the middle. Pew, pew. It's a trap! And I hit OK to get out of here. And lastly, here we've got live view display settings. So live view display setting effect is currently on. This is good. This is showing us a live representation. When you look through the electronic viewfinder, or I don't want to say it, use the LCD screen to take photos, you're getting a representation of the actual exposure, what the photo is going to look like after the fact, at least determined by exposure. Let me show you this here right now. I'm going to press the shutter button halfway down to get out of the menu, and you can see that it's super dark. So we wouldn't take this picture because it's not good. So if I dial down my shutter speed, and let me go ahead and focus as well so it looks sharp. Oh, you could also hear the audio. That's an audible beep that lets us know that you know, it's in focus, and it also lets us know that we're not in silent mode, but you can see an exact representation. We wouldn't take the photo here, that's way too bright. So we would change the shutter speed and get it back to where it looks right. That is the live view representation. This is super powerful. The only time you turn this off is if you're gonna be shooting with flash, because you wouldn't get an exact representation of what your image is going to look like at that point. And the other two settings I leave set exactly where they are. Number 11. 11? 11? 11! Marker. Aspect markers. I personally leave these off. I don't need to see the aspect, but maybe it's good to put it like, I'm gonna end up cropping it square later for whatever random reason you would do that, then maybe you would wanna see that aspect ratio show up inside of the camera. So you could totally do that and it would just be the lines and you could still see outside of the lines. And if you see some weird numbers here at the bottom, those are different aspect ratios for different video settings. So I personally keep this off, but of course you can turn that on yourself. Now, shooting options. We've got select memo shoot. So this is, again, it's confusing. That's why we're making this. Pre-capture shooting, I'm gonna hit the trash can for once and it's actually gonna help explain this. It adds a rating to the first image captured after the shutter was released when using pre-capture. So remember, if your finger's pressed halfway down, it's pre-recording if you have pre-capture on. What it's saying is it's going to put a star on the picture where you take the picture. So it's kind of a fun game to see where you actually reacted. Did you do a good job? Did you not do a good job? So it puts a star there and you can count if it's 30 and you held your finger down for a whole second, you would have 30 pictures before that 31st shot. That is something that I put on. So I put this one, I set it to a 1-star rating. So I like to see where it is, and you could see it, you could set it to 5 stars. I just like to leave it at 1. And top image is it's going to add a star to the first image of a burst. I don't think that's necessary at all. Only for pre-capture is where I use it. And that, my friends, takes us out of the shooting menu. That is it's one of the deepest menus that are here, but you can see how far Sony has taken it with customization. Now we're gonna jump into the next menu, which is exposure and color. Now, from here on out, it's not gonna be as intense as the first red shooting menu. That thing is super deep and super intense, but let's get into we'll call this magenta menu. We've got exposure. Over here, we've got bulb timer settings. Now, if you ever shoot bulb is basically where you hold the shutter down, and as long as your finger is pressed down, the shutter stays open. But under here, there's a couple of things you could change. Bulb timer, exposure time, maybe is the only thing you would change, but you're not gonna be doing 60-second exposures where you just hold your finger down. That's kind of absurd, but those are your bulb settings. ISO, obviously very important. We click on it, it's showing you that I'm currently at 800 ISO. When you get your camera, it's going to be set to auto ISO, which is right here. Now, auto ISO means the camera is going to make all of the choices when it comes to, should it be at 100? Should it be at 12,800? You can go in and set parameters and say, do not go above 4,000 if you wanted to do that, or 6,400. I generally don't shoot in auto ISO, and by generally, I mean basically never. 99.99% of the time, I do not shoot in auto ISO. The only time you will ever find me going into auto ISO is if there's a soccer match, something I'm photographing outdoors, where half the field is in shade and the other half is in sun. That is an impossible situation for me to make a quick change. Or for you birders out there who are photographing something in the shaded area and then for no reason or out of nowhere it decides to fly away into the sun, not directly, but into an area where it's more bright, that is a time where auto ISO could come in handy. And also, when you're first starting out, it is not a bad place to be just to start to get good pictures and not worry so much about exposure. A couple of things that I want to tell you here is I shoot it manual. So I control my ISO. I change different buttons, which we'll see in a few minutes when I change the ISO dial. But you see these lines underneath ISO 50? The line underneath on the low end and the line underneath when we get to the high end, wow, they put a whole square around it now. These are considered not recommended or not the native ISO, meaning it can do it, but the engineers that put it together are like, well, it might not be the best of the best with honors, sir, so they don't fully recommend it as being native. Now, if you do need to squeeze out to 50 or 80, you certainly could do it, but just be mindful that natively ISO 100 is the lowest one in this camera. Going back to auto real quick, I know I mentioned this, but you can change the parameters right here. I could just go over, I can hit up, and you can see, up there it is, 4,000. That would be the limitation on the high side. Generally speaking, I mean, in this day and age, 12,800 is perfectly fine to shoot at. We've got ISO range limiter. This is the same thing. If we don't want the low to be 50 ever, we can change it and just say 100, and then you will never go into that mode again. Going on to number 2, exposure compensation. We spoke about exposure comp earlier. This will come in handy if you're using auto ISO. If you need to overexpose or underexpose in certain situations, you would go into this area and go ahead and set it there. But we also have different dials that you can set to be exposure comp. I never use exposure comp. This dial that I mentioned back here is a spin dial that you unlock, is by default exposure comp, but I'm personally going to change it to be my ISO. Moving down to number 3, metering. So this is how the camera will determine what the shutter speed should be if you're in auto, what aperture and ISO should be. This is all determined by the metering mode. So currently it's set to multi. Basically, this is taking an average of the brightest area and the darkest area and going, okay, this is what the exposure should be. And generally speaking, it's very good. So my camera is normally here, but I'm shooting manual. And when I'm shooting manual, the only thing that it's affecting is the meter at the bottom of the camera. Let me show you that real quick. You see how it's blinking -2 right now? That's because I have the lens cap on. But let me take it off and I show back here on the camera, well, now the exposure isn't as far off. And if I just keep dialing down, look, we're back to 0 zeros. That's telling us that this is a properly exposed image. This is all based off of the metering mode that we're currently on, but there are other metering modes. So let me show you that, and that would affect the image as well. So right here, we've got center weighted metering, which is going to take a reading more along the center. Spot metering, you've got standard as well as large, is going to look for a spot right in the middle. The place where that comes in handy is if you're photographing someone outside and the background is super bright and they're not in as bright of an area, you want the spot to read that subject's face. Then that's what you would use. Sony went ahead and added something new, I'm pretty sure here, which is entire screen average, which when you look at the definitions is literally the same thing that multi is. I've always seen multi as giving me the average of the entire scene, and that's what it's doing. So I'm not sure what this new mode is. And then this mode right here is reading for highlights and not reading for the shadows. I mean, most of the time, I just leave it right here in multi and I shoot away. Next, we've got face priority in multi-metering. This is where it's going to meter now for the face. This is why metering modes have almost been obsoleted, because back in the day, they meant a lot. Today, with the mirrorless cameras, they're not as important as they once were. Spot metering point, center. Of course, we want to read the exact center of the frame there. Next up, we've got spot metering point. So currently it's set to center. That means that it's going to read whatever is in the center. But this is interesting with mirrorless cameras. We can now link the spot metering to the point, the focus point. So if you move your focus point to the left or the right, it's going to continue to read the subject there. For example, if you're shooting a concert and the lead singer moves away from the center and you just want to put them off center, if you had a black background, the meter would read the black background. But if it stays to where your focusing point is, which could be locked on their face, it's going to keep the metering right for that situation. So we could go ahead and change that, but most of the time, I'm not changing my metering mode. Let me jump in here real quick and say, do you struggle getting sharp, crisp, and clear images like these in low light situations? Well, if you said yes, I have a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations that you can get right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com. Just look for this orange box, put your name, email address in it, hit send it. I'm gonna send you that guide for free. And lastly, here we have auto exposure lock with shutter. So if you're doing like 30 shots in a row, which is only 1 second, it's going to automatically determine whether it should change the exposure while you're shooting. I just leave this on auto altogether. Flash, if you were to use a flash, this is where you would put the flash on the hot shoe and come in here and you can make all of your changes for a flash, but there is no flash built into this camera. White balance, number 5. So we've got white balance is currently set to auto. Now's a good time to say if you shoot RAW, you can have a much easier time changing the white balance after the fact versus if you were to shoot JPEG and totally mess up your white balance. It is a good recommendation to make sure that you get your white balance as close as possible. When you're shooting in the camera, it makes your life much easier. I live most of the time in auto white balance for the things that I'm shooting. The only times I will change it is if I'm in a auditorium and the light is being thrown off by other like LEDs coming on around boards that's changing the color of the reflections on the ground. I make sure to lock my white balance in manually so that it stays the same the entire game. So we go in and we have it currently set to auto white balance, but these are all the different options that you have that you could go in and set yourself. One of the most important ones is this, a custom temperature that you would set yourself. So if you know that the lights are set to 5,600 degrees Kelvin, then you could just match the lighting with the white balance of 5,600. This is mostly useful when you're shooting video. You're gonna wanna set custom white balances because it's much harder to change that after the fact. Next up, we've got priority set in auto white balance. You've got standard, which is just standard white balance. Next, you've got auto white balance for ambient. It's gonna give it a more warm feel to it. And then in ambient white, it's going to give a priority to things that are more cool, or it's gonna give you a more cooling look. So more blue and cold, but also more white when it's reading the light. Next up is shutter auto white balance lock, which is basically saying if this was on, very similar to the one we talked about a few seconds ago, that if you're shooting a burst, the white balance isn't going to shift if it's on. I have never turned this off and I think it's perfectly fine. And lastly here, we've got white balance, I believe capture, that means capture frame size. It's set to large. You've got small, you've got medium. It's funny, here they say medium before they say middle. That's kind of hilarious. That's why I say medium before. But basically what this is doing is changing the size of the box that's taking the reading of the light to set your white balance. Number 6, we've got color tone. Dynamic range optimizer is affecting your JPEGs. I like to turn this off. This is basically probably raising your highlights and just trying to give a more even look. I don't like anything that's pretty much auto. You do have a bunch of different options here, different levels that it will do, but this is something that I personally turn off. Creative look. Now this is where we set our picture style. Currently, it's set to standard. You have a bunch of different options, neutral, vivid. I think standard's pretty good. I may go in and tweak it myself, but now's a good time to tell you that this does not affect your RAW file, your final image that you bring into the computer when you shoot RAW. Now, when you shoot JPEG, this is what is being locked in. So if you were to go to monochrome, you have different film settings, by the way, those are new. We're not getting a look there. If we were to lock it in black and white, and we were to take photos in JPEG only, and we want to get the color back, we can't because we shot it in JPEG, and the camera threw away all that data and was like, bye-bye color data, we don't need you. And then you're like, oh, I think I want that. And you're like, well, you can't have it because you got rid of it. The way that you keep it is you would shoot RAW, and the image would come into the computer, and the preview on the back of the screen would be in black and white. But if you want to bring back the color, you just hit reset and the color comes right back because you have all of the raw data. That's why I personally leave this set to standard. But if I arrow over to the right, I'd be like, you know what? I want my contrast to be bumped a little bit. I want my highlights, I'm going to leave them the same, shadows the same, fade the same, saturation, bumping it a little bit, sharpness I leave alone. There's a lot in here and I leave most of that alone, and then I would lock it in. The reason I would make subtle tweaks, I know it's not affecting my final raw image, but it's affecting the preview on the camera. And so when I do that, I want it to be more representative of my editing style after the fact. That's why I do some tweaks right there. And then I lock it in and we are set with standard. Next up, we've got picture profile. Now, you could think of this as creative looks but for video. This is where you would go in and set those different profiles for video. Now, soft skin effect will not work right now because I'm in continuous shooting mode. I do not recommend using soft skin effect. It makes you look like something you are not. But if that's something that you want to do because you want to soften your skin, well, you would have to get out of the mode that I'm currently in, and then it will do some digital touching up and affect the JPEG file. And number 7 here, we've got zebra display. The zebras you could turn on or off. We generally think of zebra lines when it comes to shooting video, and what it's showing you when it shows you zebras, it's showing you where the blown out areas of the frame are. So if you're shooting say a plane flying across the sky, well, if the plane is properly exposed, but the sky is kind of blown out, then you would see zebra lines around the sky letting you know there is no detail there. I personally don't keep that on for shooting stills myself. And the zebra level is the sensitivity to reading those highlights. Super important. We're moving over to the purple menu. My favorite color is purple, but this is the focus menu. So under autofocus and manual focus, we're scrolling over. We've got focus modes. Right now it's on what's called automatic AF. That's basically saying that the camera's going to decide whether it should do single shot AF or continuous AF based on what you're photographing. Back in the day, single shot was something that we used when we wanted to make sure we would lock in on a subject, hold our finger halfway down on the button, and when we move, it does not continuously autofocus. Let me just show you this. So I'm going to press the button halfway down, listen for the beep because I'm in single. There's the beep. My finger's pressed halfway down. I'm moving the camera, I'm recomposing, but it's not continuously autofocusing. That is something you would use if you're not trying to track a subject. But let me go back into the camera and change that to continuous autofocus. So let's go out, and you see the boxes? They're constantly moving. It's continuously autofocusing the whole time. So we want to focus there, and when we want to go over here, it's going to continuously autofocus as my finger is pressed halfway down. Now, the reason I show you that demonstration is, in this day and age, with mirrorless technology and mirrorless cameras, and how good these autofocusing systems are, it's very rare that you are going to go into single shot mode. So I leave it in continuous autofocus basically all of the time, and you're paying for the quality autofocus that this camera does. So that's why I leave it in continuous autofocus. DMF is not a mode that I go into. It's going to override and allow you to tweak your continuous autofocus. And then manual focus is where you go if you don't have a switch on your lens to switch it into manual focus. You would manually do it right here. But generally speaking, I am in continuous autofocus all the time. The next 2 things I leave on balanced emphasis. This is for if you're in single shot or continuous AF. Okay, I'll explain it real fast. One is balanced emphasis is between autofocus and release. If you put it on release and the picture isn't in focus, like the camera doesn't have it in focus, it will still shoot the picture. Now, if you say that you want it on AF, it's going to wait for it to be in focus before it takes its photo, or you just leave it in balance emphasis and it makes the decision for you. Like, this mattered back in the day. When the cameras, you're like, I don't know, it's like, I don't think it's in focus, and it's like, I don't want to waste a picture. It doesn't matter as much today, so I just leave them both on balance emphasis. Now, this is important. We've got AF level for crossing. That means when a subject is crossing your frame, do you want it to stay locked onto the subject that you're shooting, already in focus, or do you want it to be responsive? So imagine you're photographing soccer and you're focused on the person right in front of you, but someone does a crossing route, that's football, but whatever, American football, they cross in front. Do you want it to be responsive and grab them, or be not responsive and stay locked onto the subject that you're on? That's for you to decide. 2 or 3 is fine. If you want it to be super locked on, you can go and add it to 1. Next up, we've got autofocus tracking for speed changing. It's currently set to standard, but if you're shooting erratic subjects, do you want it to be super responsive, or do you not want it to be super responsive? So I go with responsive. So the only time you would want to be on stable is if you're feeling unstable and you're like, you know what, feeling a little unstable right now, I just want to feel more stable, man. Yeah, no, responsive. So we put that on responsive. AF illuminator. Remember earlier in the video I showed you that orange light that came on? I do not want this on, ever. I turned it off. I do not want it. Aperture drive in autofocus. So this is another thing that I leave on standard. This isn't going to affect anything, so I just leave that exactly where it is. Next up, we've got preset focus zoom. So if you have a lens that has a pre-focus button, a custom button on the side of it, you could set it to zoom to a certain area, or you could lock focus in and be like, yeah, I want you to get back to that exact focusing area on the field every single time. So that's where you go ahead and do that. Next up, we've got AF with shutter. So when I was continuously autofocusing, I use the shutter button, right? I press it halfway down, continuous autofocus. The only time you wouldn't use this is if you were doing back button focus only. I do not want to get into the weeds talking about back button focus. You might find people on the internet telling you that back button focus is the way to go, and they are wrong. They are wrong. 20 years ago, they may have been, more right. Today, absolutely wrong. Not getting into the weeds. Don't do back button focus. Lastly is full-time direct manual focus. It's good to have off. The reason is if you turn it on and you turn the focus ring on your lens, it's going to override your autofocus and go into manual focus. That is not something that you want it to do. So I leave that off officially. Focus areas are very important. So let's get into focus area. You've got your wides, your zone focus, center fixed. You've got spot, which is you've got your medium, your large, your extra large, small, and extra small, kind of like my t-shirts. Expanded spot, I'm just trying to get down to the last one. This is a custom one. The one that I am on basically the entire time, and I'm not even sure why the other ones are here anymore, is you see the arrow down with the button? This is lock-on tracking. So this is what you're going to use to take advantage of the quality autofocus in this camera. The eye detect, the face detect, the tracking of subjects. This is the mode you have to be in. So if you're finding that your subjects are not being tracked or the box isn't locking on and moving, that's because you need to be in this mode. This is basically taking all of the other modes, putting it into one, but giving you the ability to lock and track your subject. You can do it with different size boxes, medium, large, extra large. You've got your tracking center fixed, tracking zone, or tracking wide. If you use tracking wide, that is going to basically look at the entire frame and grab your subject. It's not a bad place to be when you start. And then other times I'm like, you know what? There's a lot going on in the frame, but I know that it's going to be in this area that I want to look for that bird, or I want to look for that subject. So you just have to play around. But also they give you other custom ones that you can custom set that are different sizes. Like this would be interesting for tennis. We don't ever want it to focus on the net. So we just put the box right above the net, and it's only going to focus on things generally within that box. Of course, if you move, and it's a good habit to get into, you move your camera sometimes to find the subject with the point versus moving the focusing point with the joystick. But you can move the focusing points with the joystick in this particular mode. But you're gonna wanna be in the lock-on tracking. One last thing I wanna show you in here with the custom ones. You see how it has the Oscar the Grouch button? We click on that to custom set it. So if I turn this, we can see that it's shrinking the box. If I do the front dial, it's doing this. If I do the back dial, it's doing that. So you are basically creating a custom box, which is pretty nice if you know where your subject's going to be. And then you hit OK and you lock it in. And look, you see how I'm moving it? I'm using my thumb on the joystick to move it around. That's how you do it. And press the center of the joystick and it puts the box right back in the middle. Next up, we've got focus area limit. Look at all those options. Like if I didn't need the custom ones, I could turn these off and they won't show up in the menu. So it just makes it much easier to jump around from one to the other when you don't have 73 different options to choose from. So let me just dial down here and go ahead and hit OK, so those are officially turned off. Switch vertical and horizontal AF area. I leave this off. I don't need my auto-focusing points moving when I go vertical or horizontal. Focus area color. I like changing this to red. I like to see in the viewfinder, let's see. See, now it's red. That's this box that's moving. I changed it from red to white. And by red to white, I actually mean I changed it from white to red. It's just much easier to see in the majority of scenes, especially if you're in somewhere that's bright. just red just makes total sense. So I changed that there. AF area registration is off. I leave it off. We've got delete registration area AF. I don't mess around with this setting at all. AF area auto clear is currently off. It's only for when you're in single shot. We don't mess with it. Next up, we've got area display during tracking. I do want this on. Basically, if you're locked onto a subject, I want to see that it has the face or the eye. I want to know that it gathered the subject. So it's going to give you like a gray box around the subject. So that's something that I like having on. AFC area display and phase detect area, we leave these the way they are. Next, we have not proper English, circulate of focus point. Kind of weird. Does not circulate. What that means is, watch, if I'm gonna push all the way over to the right, it's stuck there on the right, the red box. So if I want it to go to the other side of the frame, we can do this. Now, if I keep pushing right, it's just gonna keep going and going and going and going. I kind of like that because there's times where I'm like, oh snap, something's happening on the left. I move it over to the left. But if it's tracking a subject, you kind of don't even have to worry about that box as much. AF frame move amount, it's currently set to standard. This you could put on large. I don't know why they just don't call it fast, because look how fast the autofocusing points now move. See, much faster. That may be kind of too fast, but it would kind of be nice if they had slow, middle, and large. That would be better, just for different speeds. But actually, I found standard to be pretty fine for this. That's for you to figure out what works best for you. We've got subject recognition in AF is on. We absolutely want to recognize the subject. That's why we spent all the money on this camera. Recognition targets. We've got humans. You could set it to auto if you're not sure what you're going to photograph, but you got humans, animal and birds. You've got where it splits it to just animal and bird, insects, cars, trains, airplanes, and you can even go in and do more customization inside of each one of these. If you're going to photograph people, you obviously want to have humans or auto on. If you try to photograph people with animal and birds, it will work, but it's not going to work as well as if you have human on. I say this because sometimes you find yourself photographing a bird and you're like, you set it to bird and then you try to photograph people and you're like, why isn't it doing what I want it to do? Always check to see that you're in the right mode. Generally speaking, I think auto is going to be a pretty good place, but if you know you are just capturing animals on Safari like I was, or birds, then it's going to be better to switch into those modes directly. Next up, we've got recognition target select set. So if we never want to do insects, cars, trains, and airplanes, we're going to turn them off. So they won't even become options when we go and look for them. Right, left eye, select. Let me see why this is grayed out right now. This operation is not available as follows. Recognition target is set to auto. Oh, that actually makes sense. Let me change this back to human and I can go ahead and select it this time. So basically, I do let the eye do the auto select because it's generally going to be, if it can't find two eyes, it's going to just find one and focus on it, or it's going to generally focus on the closer eye of the two. So I generally leave that on auto. Let me jump in here real quick and say, are you tired of sharing your images online and all your friends and family say to you are thumbs up and fire emoji? Yeah, that kind of sucks. You want some actual feedback? Well, I'll give you actual feedback and be your mentor. I offer two different types of mentorships. One is a 15-minute recorded rapid fire critique that I send to you after critiquing your images, and the other is a 45-minute one-on-one live Zoom call where I do exactly the same thing, except we do it live. To get a preview and to sign up for one of these options, head on over to FroKnowsPhoto.com/mentorship, and I look forward to being your mentor. Subject recognition frame display is off. We turn this on. We think it should be on by default. That means it's going to show you the frame. It's going to pick the subjects, and before you even focus, it just knows that they're subjects. It recognizes it, and it shows you that it recognizes it. It's just another peace of mind right there. Face memory. This is where you could add a couple of different faces. Say you have a bride and a groom, and you're like, in one, I'm going to put the bride because I want her to have priority over the groom, and then you're going to have the groom in number 2, and if it can't find the bride, it's going to jump and recognize the groom, And if it's somebody else, then it's going to recognize them. It's not something I ever personally use, but I guess in that situation, if they're coming down the aisle and you save their faces in it, and you don't want like Aunt Joan stepping out and being like, "Hey, it's Aunt Joan," and you're like, "Screw you, Aunt Joan, sit your ass down in that pew." And yeah, and then before you get pew-pewed, but I mean like Star Wars pew-pewed because I'm wearing the Star Wars shirt, but you know what I'm saying. You would do face recognition right there. So being that we set face memory, if you put some people in there, you're gonna want register face priority on. If it's off, it's not gonna give priority to anybody. And it might go back to Aunt Joan, who should be sitting on her tuchus in that pew. Auto magnification in manual focus is on. So if you're in manual focus and you start turning the focus ring, it's going to automatically punch in like one time, because you can see initial focus magnification down there, a few lines is on 1x, and so that's going to help you manual focus. And then the way that you get out of that zoom in is you press the shutter button halfway down and it pulls it back. This really is helpful when you're shooting macro. And I keep everything else the same in this menu. And lastly, we've got peaking display. So if you want to use focus peaking, which is basically it lights up red and it helps you find, it's for when you're shooting with manual lenses or if you're shooting in manual focus, it's going to put a highlight around the focused subject. So as you move it, you're like, oh, the trees are in focus or the person's in focus. So it's going to do a bright red line around whatever is in focus. It makes it really easy to get things in focus that you couldn't do way back in the day because you didn't have anything really helping you. You had to rely on your eyes. Now we rely on the technology. Peaking level we leave set to middle, and peaking color, I like to change it to red, but you can make it yellow, you can make it blue, it's whatever you want to do, but red is generally what I see for focus peaking. And that right there takes us out of peaking and display and takes us into the playback menu. Now we're in playback. There's not a lot of stuff I change in this menu, but let's go all the way down to playback options. So display as a group is currently off. What this means is if you were to do 30 or 40 pictures in a row in one fell swoop, it would only show up as one image on the back of your screen, but then you would have to press the center button to then go in and look at those. It's really bad. It's not great for quickly getting to an image to see if you like it, so I leave that off. Display rotation is currently set to auto. I don't like display rotation being on auto. I like it to be on off. The reason is, let me pull this up. This is a vertical shot, but it's now showing on the entire screen. So if I was to look at it vertical, there's more space that it's covering. Now if we go back in and we go display rotation to auto, and we do the same exact thing, you see that it rotated it, and we've got black bars on the left, black bars on the right, and it doesn't show us the full-size image. That's why I personally turn the display rotation off. Next up, we've got focus frame display. I like to put this on. This is going to show us the focus point when we are playing back the image. Aspect marker display, I don't use that at all. Display specific time that an image was taken, I don't need to go into that. Image jump is if you want to jump quickly from 10 to 100 different images, especially if you're taking quite a lot, you would then come back into here. Next up, we're in green, which is the connectivity menu. We are gonna spend no time in here. And by no time, I mean very little time. This is where you would connect your smartphone. This is where you would get into your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and your wireless LAN and your FTP transfers. The one thing we'll talk about is if you're going to stream, you can go to your USB streaming and you can change this to 4K 30 if you want to stream at higher resolution. This is where you would go ahead and make those changes. But other than that, there's nothing more we need to talk about here because it gets super in depth. The last one though is the setup menu, which I feel should kind of be up a little higher, but whatever. Here we are, setup menu, area, and date. We already have the language set to English. This is where you would change it if you get if your camera shows up and you're in the United States and it's set to a different language other than English, it is possible that you have what's called a gray market camera, meaning it didn't originate from the US, doesn't have a US warranty. And by originate in the US, meaning it was sent to the US with a US warranty. If it comes in a different language, it means it was meant for a different area of the world. Doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means that if you have an issue, you have to send it back to the area it was destined to be. Area, date, time settings, that's where we would make our changes. NTSC and PAL selector. It should be set to NTSC for me here. I'm not going to make a change because it would ruin my recording, but if you were in Europe, you would be on the PAL setting. Reset save settings. We're not going to reset all the settings because we just took all of this time to get our camera set up. But when you are finally done setting up your entire camera, you want to come back here, which means, and you want to do a save load setting. Save load setting is simple. It's where it saves all of the settings to the memory card. And if you have two cameras and you want them to have the same settings, you would save load right to the card, then you would go into the other camera, find this option in the menu, and you will load those settings. That way, both cameras can be synced with the same exact time and the same exact settings. A good rule of thumb is take the save load setting, put it on your computer, and email it to yourself with the subject line, save load setting for Sony a7 IV. So you can always search for it. If for any reason you reset your camera and you need to get back to this, you would just go to your email and you would have them. Next up, we've got operation customization. Remember all the times I told you about how you can custom set the buttons to this camera and dials and basically everything? This is where we start to do it. So when I go over, you can see it's showing me the rear, all of the buttons that are capable of being remapped. So if I don't want any of these buttons to do what they currently do, well, I can make a change. So movie shooting, if I don't want this to be movie shooting, I could make the change. Let's see, back dial. This is the one I wanted to do to make it more like my Canon. I don't need exposure compensation on this back dial because I don't want to use it. So I can go in here and I can go up to exposure and I could go to ISO. And so now this is officially set to ISO. So let me go out of here real quick. Let me click this to unlock it and watch that ISO in the bottom right corner. It's now changing. My shutter speed is to the left and the ISO is to the right. So it's just real quick for me to make a change, and then I wouldn't have this locked in as often because I want to be able to change my ISO unless I just want to lock it in. So that is a great function right there. This is where you make all of the changes that you want. It's fully customizable. AE lock button, I would want this to be my pre-capture. So I go over here, let's go to drive mode and pre-capture. So now I've set this button to pre-capture. Let me show you how that works. So I'm gonna hit the button. There it goes, pre-capture on, pre-capture off. It is that simple, very customizable. One of the other things I like to add is speed boost, and you can add that to whatever button that you want. I generally kind of want it pretty close to where my thumb is gonna be in case something happens super fast. So that's why I use the AF on button for speed boost generally, but it all depends on what I'm shooting. Sometimes I go in and tweak it a little bit more. But yeah, super, super customizable right there. You can also see that you have custom keys with the video camera, so you can go in and set custom keys when you are in the video mode. We're not gonna go into that right now. Custom key settings for playback, same thing. You would go in there and make changes, but this is something we're gonna look at, function menu settings. You can see that you have on the top for stills, on the bottom for video. In here, we've got shutter mode, so you could change your shutter mode from mechanical to electronic. Or this one right here is silent mode, to turn it on and off silent. So a lot of the things we set in the menu were already there or are already there in this function menu, which is this FN button on the back, which we talked about a long time ago in this video. Or if you swiped from the bottom of the screen up, that's how you get to the function menu. Still much easier to press the function button. But we could go in here and change something. So if I don't want record memory storage or image quality settings, I could be like, yeah, I don't want you in here, and let's just put in some random thing, like this, which I would never use. It would put it there. You get the point. You can just make the changes yourself. So let's go ahead and go back out. Same thing with the function menu for playback. You can make the changes there as well. Next, we've got display for the still mode for screen display. So we've got monitor and finder. What this means is what info is going to show up on the camera. So if I don't want this histogram and level to show up, I can turn it off and it's not gonna show up again when we're using that screen once I lock it in as okay. Now finder is your electronic viewfinder. So it could display all info, or you can say no display info at all. You can see that you have custom options that you could change. I like my screen to be kind of clean when I'm shooting, mostly clean. But you can then go through with the display button, which is this one that says disp, and you would just press the up arrow when you're shooting, and it's going to change and rotate through the different display options. Of course, the same thing, changing your display for shooting video. Next up, we've got different set for stills and movie. So for example, if I'm shooting still images at 1/5000th of a second and I switch into the movie mode, you don't want it to be at 1/5000th of a second because generally you'll be at 1/50th of a second or 1/125th of a second. And this way it will split the two of them so that they're not linked together. That's good if you're a hybrid shooter, someone who goes and shoots stills and then switches into shooting video. So here I would be like shutter speed, ISO. I want those to be different. So if I'm at like 32,000 ISO, I don't want that to be the same when it comes into the video mode. So let me just go all the way down here and lock it in, and now it's locked in. Record with shutter. So if you're in video mode and you want to use the shutter button to start and stop video, just another way to do it, you could go ahead and turn that on. This one is to add a mark to a video clip. It's not something I ever would use, so I just leave it off altogether. Dial customization. So you can see you've got your still customization, your video customization. You can go in here and change what the different dials do. You can see I set this earlier to ISO, now it's set to ISO. It's very similar to what we had earlier. So that's custom there. My dial settings is not a thing that I've ever touched. You don't need to worry about it. We've got your AV/TV rotate. What that means is aperture and shutter speed. It's going to rotate normally, whereas if I go to the left with my shutter speed, it's getting slower. I go to the right, it's getting faster. This gives you the option to reverse it, which is stupid. I would never Missy Elliott it, so don't do it. Function ring lens. Right now, this is not, I don't have a lens with a function ring on it. If I did, this is where I would go ahead and make the control settings. Lock operation parts is currently off. If there were certain things I didn't want to be active at a certain time, like certain buttons, you could set it in here and you could turn it on. But yeah, this would be like turn off the dials and turn off the wheels, turn off everything, turn off the multi-selector. Really not something you're gonna find yourself going into very often. Next up, we've got touch operations. This is where you would go if you want to change the different touch options on the screen. I don't touch it. Accessibility, we stay out of here as well. Finder/monitor. So let's say we want to go in here. Right now it's auto switching. So when we went from the display on the back of the screen to the proximity sensor, it would switch to the EVF. If you just wanted it to be viewfinder only, you could go ahead and set that so it will never turn on the monitor. There might be a case where you need that, so this is where you find that. Monitor brightness, I can't change that right now because I'm plugged into this external recorder, but I always leave this on manual. I want it to be locked in right in the middle because if it's too bright or too dark, it could, and you're using it for your exposure, it could throw it off altogether. Viewfinder brightness, I leave it on auto. The reason it's blacked out right now is because I'm plugged into it, but I leave the brightness on auto. So it's gonna auto change. When you get into a darker situation, it's gonna make the viewfinder slightly darker. When you get into a bright situation, it's gonna make it a little brighter. Just don't go in there and max it out or minus it out and then try to shoot in manual because you're gonna be off by multiple stops if you do that. I never change the finder color temperature. Never at all. Display quality, I go to high because why wouldn't we want the highest display possible? Next up, this is grayed out as well because I'm plugged into the HDMI, but we would want to go and put this on high as well. That's gonna come in handy when you're shooting sports. It's just a faster refresh rate inside of your EVF. Monitor flip direction is on auto. That's when you flip it out and rotate it. It's gonna then flip over and show you exactly what you're seeing and not be upside down. And vertical display is on. This is important because watch what happens. I'm in horizontal, I turn the camera vertically and the display changes, allowing you to see all of the information vertically. That is one of the coolest features in just about every camera these days, because back in the day we had to like look at everything on the side because it didn't rotate and you just had to get good at reading it the opposite way. Back here. Next up, we have display options. A bunch of these are more advanced when it comes to if you're shooting video. Like Gamma Display Assist is where if you're shooting log footage, you can then have basically a corrected image showing when you're shooting video on your screen, but know that you're still going to get your log footage after the fact. Gamma Display Assist type, it's set to auto, but if you were going to shoot S-Log 3, but you wanted to show you the 709 on the screen, you would go here, and that's where you would make that change. We've got Remain Shoot Display is not displayed. This is weird that it's buried all the way here, but Shoot Only Display. Let me explain this to you by showing it. Do you see how this popped up on the side? That's showing me how much is left in my buffer. As I take pictures, it goes down. Boom. And the buffer is full, right? So that's what's going on there. I like to see that because I like to know that I'm about to outrun my buffer, because if you outrun the buffer, it actually takes slightly longer to allow you to start shooting again. So make sure, I definitely put that on. It's a good thing to have, especially when you're shooting RAW. If you're shooting JPEG, it's really not going to affect very much. Auto review is something that I leave off. That's when you take pictures and it's going to automatically pop up every time. That's an amateur thing. We make sure that is fully off. Shoot mode display screen, I leave this set to display. Next up, we've got power setting options. Now, ignore what you're seeing here, ignore the man behind the curtain. The reason is I'm plugged in and we don't want any power to go off while I'm doing this because it interferes with our recording. But this monitor low brightness by default where it's set is very good. So when you're not shooting after a certain amount of time, your monitor display will get darker so it's not chewing as much juice up. Power save mode, you could change this. If it's 5 minutes it's sitting there, it will turn itself off. But the auto power off temperature is set to standard. This is something that you should change to high, especially if you're shooting video. It's going to allow you to shoot longer without the camera saying, hey, I'm overheating, you need to turn me off. So you would go to high for this. And there it gives you a little bit of a warning and you hit, okay, I read your warning, and then you continue on. Next up, we've got sound options. So playback monitor volume. So if you have headphones plugged in, you may want it to be louder. You could totally go up to 15. I like to be at 11 because 10 isn't enough. I like when it goes to 11. 4-channel audio monitoring. This is where you would direct the audio to go. So if you were able to split the channels, you're like, oh, I want this in my headphones. That's where you would do it. And the last few settings, I just leave exactly as they are. USB, and we have select when connected, meaning if we want to power the camera, we'll let the camera know at that time, or if we want to stream from the USB-C, we would let it know that. Next up, we've got external output, HDMI resolution, 1080p, HDMI output settings. This is the place you would go that if you were recording to an external recorder like we are doing, this is where you would make all of those changes to do so. This is really, most people are never gonna dive into this section. And then we've got setup options. In this menu, really the only one we're gonna talk about is the anti-dust off function. So this is where you would go to clean your sensor, whether you want to manually clean it, where it's gonna lock it in place so you can physically clean it. You wanna be very careful, make sure you know what you're doing before you do that. Or if you wanna have it shake, like shake it off, as that one woman sings in her song, it can do that automatically. That's for just small, fine particles and dust. It will do that. Shutter when powered off is currently off. At the very beginning of the video, when I was putting the lens on, you saw that the shutter, the sensor was exposed. It was just open. Well, you can have it so that the shutter will come down at power off and sort of give you protection, but understand that the shutter is a super dainty thing that if you touch or break, you're in trouble. I like to keep this off because it's slow to go down and slow to come back up. I like to be able to turn the camera on and be as ready as possible, as soon as possible, to start shooting my photos. Version is where you will see what firmware we're on, and if we had new firmware, this is obviously 1.00, the camera is brand new, but when they do an update to that, you would come into this area and it would give you the option to update the firmware. That's where you're gonna look. Display serial number will just show you the serial number of the camera, and privacy notice is not important at all. It just has to be there for legal reasons. And that, my friends, again, takes us to the end of the menu settings as it pertains to stills. And you might think we are done because the whole left, we're at the bottom of it. Now, remember earlier on, I told you we'd get to my menu. We showed you my menu already, but this is your tile menu. This is where you basically can get to things super quick. Like if I want to change this, I can go in and access that right there. But there's also quick buttons that allow you to do that. So Look, I took this thing to Kenya and I photographed for 2 weeks with this camera, and not once did I ever go into the tile menu. Everything I needed was already in all the buttons that I had set. So yeah, this is long. This is a, very important to go through. That's why we take the time to make this. Please subscribe to our videos if you haven't done so. Give us a thumbs up now that we're at this section. But yeah, we enjoy making these to help you get a better experience right off the bat with your camera. So now we are done with setting up the menu as it pertains to shooting stills. So I just flicked the switch from stills mode into video mode, and I'm gonna run through how to set up the menu for video mode. But before I go too far and you get overwhelmed being like, wow, is this gonna be just as long as the still section? The answer to that is no, because a lot of the things that we set in the stills menu transfers over to the video menu. So the things I'm gonna talk about are the things that weren't there in the stills menu that are now important to video. So we are gonna start in the shooting menu, and as you can see, there is a video camera icon there. That's how you know we are looking at the video mode. So let's start with image quality. We've got the file format, which we already set the first time around. We've got movie settings, but I'm gonna go into the SNQ settings right here. So we're gonna go into frame rate settings. On your left is your playback, and on the right is the record frame rate. So as you can see, if we're at 30p playback at 120 frames per second, we're getting a 4-time slow motion. So notice if I go down to 24p, it's now 5-time slow motion, or up to 60p, it's 2-time slow motion. So this is where you would make those changes. Next up, we have time-lapse settings for video. This is different than the last menu because that was obviously for stills. So when we go to frame rate settings, you can see that we're at 30p. So basically what this is telling you that for a finished product of 5 seconds, it's gonna take you 2 minutes and 30 seconds of recording to get a 5-second playback. But that changes when you go to 60, and that also changes when you go to 24. You can see how the time is going to change based off of that. But also, if you take pictures every 2 seconds versus 1 second, everything is going to change as well. Next up, we've got 4K angle of view priority. Now, it's grayed out right now because I am not set to 60p or 120p. Now, it's very important that if you're gonna shoot in 60p and 120 in 4K, that you turn this on, because if you don't do it, your 4K is going to be cropped. Now, I'm not sure why Sony doesn't have this on by default. Obviously, they have their reasonings. We don't know why, but just make sure you turn it on so you're not cropping your 4K. Next up, we've got log shooting settings. So this is where you would turn log shooting on and off. You have to go ahead and turn on flexible ISO, and then you go down to color gamut, and this is where you could set between S-Log3 or Cinetone or just S-Log3. Then we have proxy settings. This is more important if the camera shot RAW, but this camera doesn't shoot RAW at all, so you don't really have to worry about proxy settings. We can do all of that in the computer anyway. And the last two things in this menu, we've got APS-C shooting. Leave this on auto like we did before. And under lens compensation, we're gonna turn on the breathing compensation because it will compensate for your lens if it has any focus breathing. But bear in mind, it might slightly crop your image if the focus breathing needs to be corrected. Now we're gonna skip ahead to shooting mode to just mention here the exposure control type. This really only matters for people that are used to using Sony's FX cameras, where they're used to more of a cinema menu. You would go into here. Say you had like a bunch of these cameras as C cameras that you put up around there and you wanna take more control. You would then go in here and change it to flexible exposure mode, but I'm gonna go ahead and leave it right here where it is set by default. Now we're jumping down to audio recording. We've got audio record levels. This is for if you're gonna use an external mic, and our recommendation is that you turn it down to 1 if you're going to put on an external mic. And then I hit OK to lock that in. We're going to jump down to audio noise reduction settings because this is something new that Sony has here, this noise cut that they offer internal mic and noise cut for external mic. For example, if you're in a location that has, say, a refrigerator and there's a low hum, you could go in here and turn on the noise cut for the external or internal mic, and it will do a fairly good job of getting rid of that hum. Next up is your digital hot shoe. This is where if obviously you had a digital recorder or some kind of device that works with the digital hot shoe, it would go ahead and allow you to access the 4-channel recording. Next up, we've got time code. Now, if you were looking to sync multiple cameras together, this is where you would go ahead and set that with your time code. We've got image stabilization. We're gonna go into steady shot right here. It's set to standard, but you also have what's called active mode as well as dynamic active. So with active, you are doing this optically in the camera, but it is going to possibly crop just a little bit. And dynamic active is for situations where there's a ton of shake going on, or say you just want to walk with the camera and you want the super steady looking footage, you would go into dynamic active mode and it's going to crop a little bit more. Now, dynamic active is doing two things. It's using optical stabilization in combination with digital stabilization. You're only going to find these two features in the video mode, not in the stills menu settings. Unless I'm trying to mimic a gimbal shot, I'm gonna leave it in standard. I hope you're enjoying this video, and if you are and you would like to be notified when new videos go live, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and if you find it valuable, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. I have over 3,500 videos over the last 16 years that I've put out onto YouTube, so I have a ton of content that will help you be a better photographer. So don't forget to check out the FroKnowsPhoto. Next up is framing stabilizer. This is if you wanted to track a subject and keep them in the middle of the frame, you would turn this on and then the IBIS would compensate to help you keep the subject in the middle of the frame. Or you could tell it like, I want them on the left side or the right side, and it's going to do the same thing. Continuing on, we have zoom. So this is where you would go if you had a powered zoom lens. You could go ahead and change the settings here, but there is something here that's important under zoom range. Right now it's set to optical zoom only, but they offer you clear image zoom and digital zoom. What's interesting about clear image zoom is that somehow it lets you zoom in digitally without losing very much in the way of quality. This is one of those settings that I'm not gonna turn on unless I absolutely need some extra reach. Now we have shooting display. One thing we're gonna change here is emphasized record display. We go ahead and turn this on. Basically, this is gonna put a red box around your LCD screen just to let you know that you are shooting video. So it's when you're recording, it shows up. It's just like another form of a tally light that should have been on by default. Skipping over marker display, you would only go in here if you were shooting with some weird aspect ratios. You would go in there. And shooting option, we go in and we are going to go to auto framing settings. Now this is one of those very interesting modes that Sony has put into their cameras. This is a mode you would go into if you were trying to film yourself and you want the camera to track you. Now your tripod isn't moving, but what's happening is you're shooting in 4K, and as you move, the camera moves the frame around to track you. It does it seamlessly, so it's kind of like some trick, but it keeps some really good quality while it's doing it. And right here are all of the settings that you can change to either crop in more or follow you a little faster. That's with the tracking speed, so you would go into this section to do it. So I recommend you give it a shot and see if it works for you. And that right there takes us through the shooting menu. And clearly it wasn't as long to go through as the stills one because we already went through most of those things the first time around. Now we're going to exposure and color. Now keep in mind, this is all exposure and color as it pertains to shooting video, not stills, but we're gonna jump down here to color tone. This is where you would make the changes to your creative look. Just like with the stills where you went and shot monochrome, the difference here with the video is if you lock into monochrome and shoot video, you can't go back and then unlock that color after the fact. It's going to be baked in. So you want to make sure you're selecting the right creative look. And just like before, this is where you can customize your look. You would arrow over and be like, oh, I want my contrast more, or I want my contrast less, so on and so forth down the line, and then you would just hit OK to lock it in. Picture profile is where you have your different profiles like S-Cinetone. This is where S-Log3 used to be, but now that has moved into its own menu option. Speaking of log, this is where you tell the camera what LUT you want to have on while you're shooting log. And you'll see that it's grayed out because right now we're in standard video and not in log at all. Manage user LUTs. This is where you would go in when you want to import your own LUTs to be put on to your footage. And lastly, you've got soft skin effect. You have a bunch of different options here. You've got off, you've got low, wow, and then you've got mid and high. Look, just know if you're going to use soft skin, it's going to lock and bake it in, so you can't unbake it after you already shot it. So just be mindful of that. Think of it like those Instagram filters that make you look like something you're not, where I look and I'm like, damn, she's hot, and then it bleeps and you're like, dude, he's old. Yeah, just be careful with soft skin effect. Now we're moving into the focus menu for video. Let's go into focus mode. So you see how it says continuous AF? You only have continuous AF and manual. You don't have that, continuous AI or whatever they called it, but you only have these two options right there. One thing you want to look at, though, is you have your AF transition speed. This is how fast it's going to rack back and forth when it's trying to find a subject. It's either going to do it super fast or super slow. The recommendation is if you're looking for that cinematic look, a slower rack is going to be better. Then we've got AF subject shift sensitivity. It's set all the way to 5, which is kind of interesting. It's going to be super responsive at this point. But if you want to stay locked onto a subject, you would just come in here and you would go like, okay, I wanted to stay locked on a little bit more. All right, back to the menu here. We already know focus area. We already know subject recognition because we set these things for stills. We've got focus assistant. This is where you would go in and say, if you wanted to like magnify while you're shooting video because you want to see if you're in focus, you could go ahead and make the changes here. But this is really if you're shooting manually focused and not just shooting auto. And lastly, peaking display. We already set this when it came to stills, so we don't have to worry about it for video either. And then the last three, we've got the playback, network, and setup are, for all intent and purposes, going to be the same as it was for stills. But we then do have to go back to the main tile menu right here. You can see that it's different than it was for stills. It's a little larger, you can see it much easier, but you could go in here and make some changes. If you wanted to go ahead and make quick changes like, oh, I want to change the levels, we could then go in here and change the levels if we needed to. And there is also a second one right here. So you can see what the other tile options are. Now remember, you can swipe left on the screen to bring up the tile menu, and you can swipe up from the bottom to bring up the function menu, all as it pertains to the video features. Now that we've made it through both menus for stills and video, I've gone back and switched into stills mode once again because I want to run you through what you might see on the screen when you look at the back of the screen or put your eye up to the viewfinder. Now keep in mind, it might be slightly different than what I see because I'm plugged in to this recorder right now, but the icons are all going to mean the same thing. So we're going to start at the top left hand of this screen. You see 1 and 2, not my guns 1 and 2, but like 1 and 2. That means we have 2 cards in the camera, and it's showing you how many shots are left on both of those cards. To the right top of that, you see that it says RAW plus JPEG fine. So it's letting you know that I'm in RAW and that I'm also in JPEG fine. Shooting at 33 megapixels, we're using the full sensor. We're getting the most megapixels out of the camera. The waving hand that says on, that is your image stabilizer, lets you know that that is active. We have AFC letting us know that we're in continuous autofocus, and the copyright sign next to that lets us know that our copyright information is on and being written into our files. To the far right, we have our battery indicator, lets us know that we have 46% of the battery left. Below there is your metering mode, followed by white balance. Right now it's on auto white balance. Then we have AF on for people, letting us know that subject tracking is on. Where it says electronic, that is letting us know that we're using the electronic shutter. Below electronic shutter, you have picture profile. This is off. This is basically a video setting. At the bottom, we've got ISO 2000. And remember, we set this back dial here to change the ISO. So as I go righter, and by righter, it goes higher. And as I go lefter, it goes lower. But we are changing that right here. If you didn't make that change, you would come down here to the joystick and you would hit over, and that's going to bring up the ISO on the screen like this. But I prefer it the way that I was showing you. Just you literally turn this dial. You don't have to hit a button to do that. Next to that, in the middle, blinking with the -2.0, that's letting you know that it's underexposed by more than 2 stops. That is your light meter, so that's where you're getting your light meter readings. Then we have f2.5. That is connected to the front dial. So as I turn my finger here and I go to the right, the f-stop goes higher. Turn it to the left, the f-stop goes lower. Then we have shutter speed. Right now we're at 1/2500th of a second. That is this back dial. I turn it to the left, it goes slower, shutter speed. Turn it to the right, it goes higher, shutter speed. Bottom left of the screen is your picture style. You see the ST, that stands for standard, and it has an asterisk next to it. That's because I made some tweaks to the contrast or the sharpness or the tone, and that's just letting me know that it's standard, but there are some tweaks. Dynamic range optimizer is currently off. That is right above there. Now the middle of the left-hand side of the screen is showing us what focusing mode we're in. That is the lock-on tracking for subject tracking. That is where I recommend you are most of the time if you're going to be tracking a subject. You might find yourself like, why is it not tracking or selecting and it's just picking a focusing point? Make sure that you have the arrow down with the shutter button option right there. That's where you're going to make that change. As we move up the left-hand side, we've got drive mode. We're in high. We're not currently in high plus. Then the manual for the camera icon is letting us know that we're shooting in stills mode and we're in manual. One more thing that I want to show you is that, remember, we custom set this AEL button to be pre-capture. So I press it, you can see that it says pre-capture is now on, and then I press it down again and pre-capture is now off. So all of this stuff shows up on the screen when you press these buttons. So one more thing I want to show you here is the function button. I hit the function button, the function menu pops up on the screen, and any of the changes that we made in the menu for stills will show up right here so that you can quickly make those changes. And this all works when you're looking through the camera. So you don't have to take your eye away from the camera to activate this. You just go ahead and hit FN and this pops right up. And remember, because you can use your touch screen, if you swipe from the right or the left, you get your quick menu, or when you swipe from the bottom up, that's another way of getting to the function menu. I still think it's much easier to use your thumb and press the FN button. Now that we have everything set, let me take off the lens cap because I want to show you the lock-on tracking here. I'm just going to turn the camera around to show Steven. There, oh, you see that box that showed up? That just lets us know that it detected a subject. I press the button halfway down and there it goes and it finds his eye. Also, this box is active right here, but it's still going ahead and finding Steven right there. And I can get my exposure locked in, be like, okay, let's keep going. Oh yeah, there's a good exposure. Take a picture, take a bunch of pictures. That's right, work it, that's right. And we take those pictures and now we can go and take a look at them on the back of the camera. So now I'm gonna hit the playback button just to show you this. Now we go in here, and if you have nothing on the screen, but you wanna see the information, you would hit display up here, and that's gonna give you all the information about the file, when you took it, your shutter speed, your aperture, everything you need to know. Hit up again, and it cycles through. You see those blinkies? That's letting us know that there is no detail in that that part of the frame. Now that's not always a bad thing, but if we scroll ahead and we do that again, you can see there's some super hot areas like the sky in the background. And in a picture like this, it doesn't matter that that's blown out there because the subject in the dugout looks perfectly fine. If we wanted to go ahead and, throw out one of these Steven pictures, I would hit the trash can, aka Oscar the Grouch, and we would hit delete. But I don't delete anything in the camera myself. I don't want to miss a shot that I'm trying to take, and I don't want to accidentally delete something that I don't want to delete. So I cancel that out. Now we've switched back into video mode, we're going to show you what I see on my screen. Again, it may be different for you because we're plugged into an external recorder, but generally speaking, you're going to see the same type of icons. We're going to start on the left-hand side of the screen. Now you can see that it shows a video camera, an M, which means we're in manual for video. Right above that are your levels for your audio. You'll be like, hi levels, I'm talking to you. And that's right, you can see them moving. To the right there, it lets us know that we're in AFC for continuous autofocus. We're shooting in 4K 24p. We're currently in standby, and it shows us that we have 3 hours and 20 minutes of record time left. But let me hit the record button to show you what happens. I hit record on the top of this camera. The standby changes to red record, and you can see that that red box shows up around the outside of the frame. Just another way to know that you're recording. And you can see that it's counting up to let you know how long of a clip you are shooting. And of course, the 3 hours and 20 minutes would go down the longer you leave it in record. Go ahead and stop it. We hit record. And you can see that it's now writing to the card. That's what those lines going back mean. It was finishing writing the data to card number 1. We don't have it set to redundant to shoot to card 2 at the moment. Of course, all the way to the right, you've got your battery indicator at 41%. Down to the bottom, we've got our metering mode, followed by dynamic range optimizer is currently off. We're in auto white balance. We're at ISO 2000. The meter is showing that it's blinking -2, so it's off obviously a lot because it's just dark. We're at f1.4 at 1/100th of a second. Woo! That was a lot of information. I love making these videos because I know they help you out. Just understand that I can't dive into every single subtle nuance, or this would be like a 20-hour-long video. My goal with videos like this is to give you as much information as I can to help you get started, and then hopefully you figure more things out along the way. User guides like this one are some of the most rewarding videos that I make. They take a ton of time. They take us many hours to film, and then you see the final result, how long it is. But the whole point is to just give you a great starting point so that you don't buy a new camera, search for it, and then you're faced with like a 10-minute video that you find somewhere else. We want to go into so much detail to help you. And if you got this far, please leave a comment down below that says, I got this far. Don't forget, bookmark this video, come back to it as you need it. There is a table of contents down below so you can jump back around when you need to find whatever information it is you need to find. But thank you very much for watching this. Jared, Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.